Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in the world. This is Gloria White. I'm coming to you from Utah, USA. Something I've been thinking about um, since I've started reading the Russia and China in Prophecy booklet, and it's the effect that the lending that China has done around the world. I showed a map the other day of all the countries that are indebted to China. They have made loans to almost every country on earth. Now, those loans are backed by a percentage of that country's GDP. So, now that we have all this virus affecting the world's economies, how is that going to affect those countries that are indebted to China? What happens if they can't pay their bill? Will China foreclose? Can they foreclose? What is the collateral of those countries? Is it the country itself? I don't know, but it's something that has been working on my mind since, the virus was originally thought to come from China. And was this an intentional? Is it a biological weapon that they've used on the world and set up the protocol for, how to contain this problem? Are they have they acted maliciously against the world, saying, lockdown, 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 that's how we beat it? So the rest of the world is following that lead. Now, why should we be following that lead? Obviously, that hasn't worked. And the things on your face, obviously that's not working either. Being so far apart, that's not working either. So what exactly is going on? Now we have a chance to protect ourselves through this program that the government has developed using technology and science. But is that the answer? But my main concern is, what exactly is China going to gain by world economies, faltering? I want to know, does anybody know what the deal is with these countries around the world? The whole world. The United States is, I think, Mr. Tom said it was $1.3 trillion that America, owes China. And I know that the map that I put up, it didn't show the US and it didn't show Australia. And there's a lot of rest of the world that it didn't show as well. And so is the whole world indebted to China? And to what tune? To what dollar amount? And with this lockdown and all the precautions that everyone's taking and the death toll climbing, how is this going to affect the loans that China holds? Are they, does anybody know the answer to that? I don't know. China has given billions of dollars in loans to developing countries, but now, as COVID-19 has increased the pace of record global debt levels, countries could be at risk of defaulting and China's carefully cultivated relationships could be about to unravel. I don't know that China didn't, take into account the defaulting on the loans that they've made. But in 2013, Chinese President announced the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, an ambitious multi-billion dollar project dubbed the Chinese Marshall Plan. It's the old Silk Road, which China says is to improve economic connectivity and cooperation across the globe. Well, the Belt and Road Initiative is basically leading into Iran so that they can get to the oil. China has a growing consumption problem, and it's growing astronomically. The research and information that I found is at the rate that they're growing, it would take like another planet to be able to provide them with the resources that they're going to be requiring for the growth that they're experiencing. So, consisting of overland corridors and maritime shipping lanes, the scheme this is Newsweek, involves 71 countries and half of the world's population. China says the initiative is an economic stimulus package designed to help state-owned businesses in what it sees as a win-win situation. Win-win for China, I suppose, but they're, doing this as if it's going to help these state-owned businesses. But I think they're mostly Chinese-owned. But critics have accused it of being a scheme with the aim of creating Chinese-centered order. So China lending in countries in Africa was $152 billion between 2000 and 2018, according to the South China Morning Post, much of which was spent on Belt and Road Initiative projects. What exactly those initiatives or projects are, I don't know. It's become known as debt trap diplomacy, where a country loans money with the intention of political or economic concessions if the loan cannot be repaid. What exactly does that mean? Political or economic concessions if the loan cannot be repaid. Well, it would seem that if there was a virus, say, that broke out and went around the world and countries could not continue paying their loan, well, should any country default, it is feared that a similar situation could arise to the one in Sri Lanka, where the government was unable to service debt on the port. It was then leased by the government to Chinese firms on a 99-year lease. The U.S. has expressed concern that the port could be used by China as a naval base. The Trump administration has repeatedly warned African nations that accepting Chinese loans could result in them losing control over strategic assets, too. It has warned that a strategic port in the tiny Horn of Africa nation of Djibouti could succumb to the same fate, a prospect the government there has denied. Well, these are the government are, like our Congress, they don't admit to anything either. Now, with the global economy struggling with the fallout from COVID-19, those worries about defaulting are more real than ever. Yet, is there any truth in the claims that China deliberately traps poorer nations into debt, and should the rest of the world, including the U.S. as well as small and poor countries, be worried? Debt trap diplomacy is one form of financial pressure or coercion, but not the only form employed by China to accumulate influence, position, military access, and power around the globe. Rick Fisher, Senior Fellow at U.S. think tank International Assessment and Strategy Center, tells Newsweek. China's goal is a revival of its Middle Kingdom style of global hegemony, in which Beijing eventually has the dominant say in a country's prosperity and security. China has been the dominant trading partner with Africa and established a China-Africa Defense, not Africa-China, China-Africa Defense and Security Forum in 2018. This group meets in China, is organized by the People's Liberation Army, and most African nations are members, Fisher says. From here, China will advance military relationships that, in cooperation with economic and political inducements, lead to Chinese military access. So it is not just debt traps. They are just one tool in a far wider array of political, economic, and military stratagems. Zambia has just issued a stark warning that it is about to default on the debt to Chinese debtors, with China accounting for roughly a quarter of the country's $12 billion of external debt. Kenya has also said that it wishes to renegotiate its $4.5 billion loan agreement with China, and these debts are not interest-free. Now, forgive me, but Chimani Ichung'wah, chairman of Kenya's Parliamentary Budget and Appropriate Committee, told the East Africa, "It is very easy to resolve this issue of loan repayment by just sitting down with the Chinese and telling them, we made a mistake. We owe you all this money, but you are also demanding so much from us in terms of repayment. This is a debt. Look, our economy is beaten and we are not able to pay. We are not saying the debt is not there, but we simply want to renegotiate what we owe you and the terms of the payment." While China has committed to debt relief for 77 countries, including Kenya, under a recent G20 agreement to help poor and developing states during the pandemic, Kenya has already said it would not seek debt relief, fearing it could harm its ability to tap capital markets. Beijing is reported to have balked at demands for future debt write-offs for countries, and with China's failure to fully participate in agreements with all of its state-owned institutions, means that during a meeting with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank urged parties to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. When China joined the World Trade Organization, it opened up China to loans from the World Bank, and they have made lots of loans, and they have used that money to basically ensnare the world in debt traps. A solution is yet to be worked out between China and Kenya. In 2015, the China-Africa Research Initiative, CARI, at Johns Hopkins University identified 17 African countries which were considered to have risky debt exposure to China and were potentially unable to repay their loans. China is looking for land. They are looking for military strategic positioning. With the pandemic pushing poor and developing countries further into debt, There are concerns that China's debt leveraging over such countries is going to increase. While China has canceled interest-free loans to Africa, according to researchers at Johns Hopkins University, interest-free loans account for less than 5% of Africa's total debt to the country. Countries such as Kenya and Zambia say further help is still needed. Matters are complicated further by the fact that the debt African countries have incurred is not only with Chinese state-owned companies, but also with private Chinese companies operating on the continent. We currently have in Canada Chinese troops, supposedly, I've heard this rumor, that there are Chinese troops guarding China's assets in Canada. Could this be what's going to be happening here on the African continent and elsewhere? Just curious, questioning, wondering. Have incurred is not only with Chinese state-owned companies, but also with private Chinese companies operating on the continent. Even if an agreement between China's government and recipient countries can be agreed upon, researchers at Johns Hopkins University have identified more than 30 banks and companies with loans in Africa, some of them made at commercial rates, who still need to be negotiated with. So far, the G20 has simply asked private companies to get on board with debt relief efforts, with the World Bank calling on China to put pressure on domestic creditors. Yet not everybody is convinced that China engages in debt trap diplomacy and will seize assets should countries default. Not everybody can agree on that. Well, we'll see. It's complete nonsense. It is a myth, Dr. Lee Jones, reader in international politics at Queen Mary University of London and China foreign policy expert, tells Newsweek. The idea that China is deliberately ensnaring developing countries in debt, knowing that they will fall into debt distress, and knowing that will allow China to seize the projects built there, is just utter nonsense. There's not a shred of evidence of it at all. I wonder how much they're getting. How much is his little, part of the world receiving for that statement? It's a myth that has been propagated by India think tanks and picked up in the U.S. for purely political reasons. It just isn't happening. Is China lending money to developing countries for projects that are perhaps not very good, or maybe would make enough money to repay them, or won't make enough money to repay them? Absolutely. But it's not doing that because it is trying to trap developing countries. It is doing that because it needs to get contracts for state-owned enterprises. It's got a lot of surplus capital it wants to get rid of. It's trying to curry favor in developing countries. The idea is that China came up with these projects and pushed them on these countries and lured them into debt so that they will fell over China, will be able to seize these assets, which is totally not true. These projects were proposed to China by the governments of those countries. And in fact, that's how Chinese development financing works. Its recipients must ask China for the projects, and they must agree to any projects that happen on their territory. They wouldn't agree if they didn't think it was a good idea. China is pushing ahead with its Belt and Road Initiative, with the country's Foreign Minister Wang Yi saying that the country's interests in the initiative remain unchanged. With trade increasing between China and those countries, even in the pandemic, what happens to the mounting debt will be closely watched closely. With half the world's population directly involved in some way, it's easy to see why. study methodology and notes. The research by Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies used data on Chinese loan commitments from the SAIS, Chinese Africa Research Initiative, and the World Bank, and data on African borrowing and debt levels from the World Bank and International Monetary Fund's international debt statistics. China's getting the money from the World Bank. Why don't these countries deal directly with the World Bank? Why is China like the middleman here? Doesn't it seem like that to you guys? Like China's just a middleman? Very interesting. But it's left me with more questions than answers, and a great concern for what's going to be happening to these countries as, these loans continue to default because, this virus is crippling the world's economy. I have to agree with President Trump saying the cure can't be worse than the disease. The cure can't be worse than the disease. And China's been at this lending thing for quite a while now, but they got all their money from the World Bank, the loans. And then they're relending to these smaller countries. They're doing projects in their countries, supposed to be beneficial to the country. Just like I've heard, well, I guess it's not safe to even go and have that discussion, but you can think about these things yourself, and you can maybe do some research and, get back to me with what you found out and understand. For me, I'm very concerned for the world being so indebted to China. You know what happens most of the time in world history? When a country, say a country is indebted to another country, and then the country that's indebted can't pay the country that, owns the debt, the loan, it usually erupts into war. Interesting. Just thinking out loud. I don't know really, but this I find very concerning. Put your comments down below. And as always, I love you.